I thought that I would explain to you what I'm sitting in front of. In behind me is a picture by Peter Bruegel, who was a 16th century painter. And this painting is called the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel is from the Hebrew Scriptures, a story meant to explain the beginnings of language. And it is a famous story for kind of introducing that theme. And so this is what I have here is a 9,000 plus piece puzzle. And I think it turned out very well. My book is called Rationality is the Essence of Literary Theory. And that is a statement that is meant to be deliberately ambiguous, and it's meant to capture two different ideas which I think are important for a ground level introduction to what's going on in literary theory. One way to read the title with those three dots, it's called an ellipsis, is to imagine that there's a colon there, that there's a stop. Rationality is. Rationality is what? And then you can say, you can finish that sentence in a variety of different ways. And in the first section of the course, I'm going to encourage you to say that rationality is male, rationality is white, rationality is repression. And these are all negative terms in the context in which they are put. The first theory that we're going to look at is feminism. The second one is critical race theory. The third one is Freudian psychoanalysis. And for all three of those theories and many other contemporary theories as well, rationality is a problem. Rationality, or the idea of rationality, covers up some kind of bias or a play for power. So rationality is problematic. And in that reading, the essence of literary theory is uncovering the various ways in which the notion of rationality is problematic. Now, the second way of reading the title is to say, okay, there's a pause, but to read it without a colon and to say, rationality is the essence of literary theory. And this reading is also defensible. What I want to suggest here is that the idea of rationality needs to be teased out, and we need to think very carefully about what we mean by rationality. But at the end of the day, is rationality a cover-up or a power play that covers up self-interest, covers up male domination, covers up white privilege, is a form of repression, manifestation of repression? Or is it the case that, no, when you study literature, when you engage literature, you are doing something that is very rational, and you are doing something that is rationally meaningful. Now, I would want to be the first to defend the notion that rationality needs to be redefined, that what you're doing when you're studying literature isn't at all, well, no, wait a minute, isn't largely the same thing as what you're doing when you are, say, running a lab experiment in a chemistry lab. I'd want to say that there are important differences between what you're doing when you're doing those two exercises. But are they entirely different? Maybe we misunderstand or give too much credit to what we think we're doing when we're doing science. Maybe we downplay when we're doing science the role of the imagination. When we emphasize the role of the imagination in art and literature, does that mean that we've strayed from the realm of rationality? Maybe not. This is something that we want to explore in this course. So there's a twofold way of thinking about the title, rationality is the essence of literary theory. If rationality isn't self-evident, like, how do I even proceed then? Like, I'm thoroughly confused. Like, how is it that I'm supposed to kind of read the next sentence or the next paragraph, or how am I supposed to carry on at university? That's a really good question if that comes to mind, because what theorists are saying is deeply perplexing and can be deeply troubling. And so I raise that issue, and I try to give a strategy for raising one's own self-awareness of the potential problematic nature of what theory is trying to do, and also to suggest a way forward, a way for acknowledging the question, but carrying on with the project. One of the things that's for sure is that theory is having an effect on contemporary society. And theory has been around in its present form since, and you'll see this in the course as it develops, since the late 60s. And it goes back further than that for sure, but really intensifies from the late 1960s and onward. And it has had an effect on society ever since. And so part of the question of this course is, okay, how do I make sense of this? And how is this manifesting itself in society? And am I happy with the state of play, or how do I think things could be a little bit different? And the course encourages you to think along those lines. Obviously, just as a second-year student, you're just learning the ropes. You're figuring out what the terminology is, and you're trying to figure out what the common points of reference are, and that's all important. But your own thinking enters into this, and your own imagining of how it could be different, what are the strengths, what are the continuing challenges. All of that is part of what's going on in this course. It is relevant to, for sure, this course is relevant to the whole of your university experience in English and in the arts generally, but it's also relevant to your experience at kind of this stage of cultural development. So the first thing that I want you to realize is that the critique of rationality is not something that theory alone does. This is actually a running theme in literature itself, and always has been. So the first thing that I want to do this week is to show you that in a variety of ways. So the first reading is just a little excerpt, the beginning of a book on the writing of poetry, and so the excerpt is called "Getting Started," and there are a couple of points from that reading that I want you to take. A notion of the effable, which goes along with the idea of art as paradox and a sacred task, and you'll note the way that the writer says that, it's not knowledge. Well, that sounds old. So it's not knowledge. Does that mean it has nothing to do with rationality? Well, we'll see, right? And then we'll see the idea of rationality itself, and a terminology that he introduces, like knowledge and technique. And there's something about practicality and banality. It's just like so ordinary. Is that rationality? Is art different from rationality? Interesting questions get posed in that very short reading. And then I'm going to ask you to read 3 different poems and to look at them for the ways in which some kind of notion of the rational gets tabled, gets put on the table, and is studied and looked at in an interesting way, in a provocative way. And you can see that each of these poems is asking oblique or difficult questions about the notion of rationality.